As you begin to put the final touches on your informative speech, I want to cover some of the strategies in speaking. This is in Lesson 7. In Lesson 7, it's informative speaking, and they've looked at the different types of informative speeches, which are demonstration, background, and definition or concept speeches. But here we're going to really delve into what's going to be most important for you as you start to practice and then deliver these speeches. There are 6 strategies. The first is to understand how to employ multisensory channels. Learning the way that we're doing right now, learning through only auditory, if you weren't able to see me at all, would really lose your attention in a very short amount of time. But even visually, as you see me as the speaker, I have to think about multisensory channels. So having a visual aid. If you watched in your lab time the example of the demonstration speech where the speaker talked about American Sign Language and then made the audience kind of engage in learning a phrase with her, she was employing multisensory strategies. So understanding how can you engage with your audience, make them not only hear, but something to see, something to possibly do, interact with your audience so that they're engaged. It only takes about 8 seconds to lose our audience's attention. 8 seconds. That is a very short amount of time. So you as a speaker in any situation, whether it's professional or as a student, but for the rest of your time as you work and interact with individuals, you need to think about the very short amount of time that you have to truly engage them and how you change your presentations up in a way that is interesting to the audience. Secondly, repetition. As we go into this political season and we're listening to politicians, many of them will have kind of a catchphrase or some type of value or policy that they're going to enact or stand behind. And so they're going to repeat that phrase to make sure that it's front of mind with their audience. Repetition creates memory. So as you go back through your speech, now you've done your preparation outline, you think about what is something that's really important that I want to stick with the audience as they leave. Maybe it's a number, a statistic. Then you need to weave that repetition into the speech so that they're more likely to remember it. The third is to explain unfamiliar terms or concepts. Many of you have expertise in an area that not everyone in your audience has. So thinking about what might I need to explain in a way that creates that shared meaning with my audience about the topic so that I can move on and go into further depth about the topic through your informative speech. So ways that you can explain, that's going to be our next point. We're going to look at the different types of ways that you can define a term or concept for your audience. And then the final thing we're going to be doing is talking more in depth about eliminating distractions, which is our last strategy. But the next is mnemonic acronyms. You're all familiar with KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Maybe you employ mnemonic acronyms as you study. Maybe there's a strategy that has a list of points that you need to memorize for a test. You're going to think about the first letter of the first word of each of those points of that strategy and try and make something that creates memory for you so that when you go into the test, you'll have an easier time prompting that memory. You can do that with your speech as well. Let's say you're doing a demonstration speech, and in the main point, maybe the second or the third main point where you demonstrate the process, how to do something, each step in that process might begin with a word that you can take those first letters and create a mnemonic acronym. Once again, creating memory for your audience. Fifth, we look at vivid language. As I said, you have done the preparation to this point. You've done your preparation outline. You know what you're going to cover in the speech. Now's the time to go back and think about how do I create that resonance, that vivid imagery for my audience, that pathos, emotional appeal. How do we do this? Most times it's through the language choices, linguistic style. The choices that we choose for the words that will, maybe it's create a picture in someone's mind, evoke a memory or an emotion. You have examples of analogies or metaphors or narratives that you can use to also create that kind of pathos with your audience. So vivid language is key if you want to engage. Think about, once again, think about the politicians in the past, great politicians like Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy, that were fabulous orators. They were wonderful speakers. And of course, those speeches were written, right? And so the strategy that those speechwriters used included many of these things. Repetition, but also vivid language that connected with the audience in a way that aroused emotion and made them connect with the speaker and get behind an idea. So vivid language, and then the sixth is reducing or eliminating distractions. We're going to talk a little bit about this more in depth at the end of this kind of mini lesson, but there's so many ways that you can distract your audience from listening to the message. It's not just nonverbal, but verbal as well. Let's start with verbal fillers, and like you know. So many times today, what we're doing is, if we haven't practiced our speech, our mind works at a rate of 8 times faster than anyone can speak or that we can speak. So if you haven't practiced your speech, as you're thinking of the next word, you are going to, without knowing it, most of the time, insert a verbal filler as your brain works to pick up the next train of thought or word. So that or like is going to be inserted. A couple of semesters ago, I had some students that were telling me that there was a history professor here on campus who said all the time, and that in one class they counted the ums. They stopped at 300. Now, were those students getting anything out of that content of that professor's lesson? No, because they were so distracted. This is what we're talking about, eliminating distractions. As a speaker, you have to be very strategic about the distractions that you might create for your audience that act as a barrier to them actually getting the message. So verbal fillers are one, and then nonverbal. What we do, our gestures, maybe it's pacing, shaking loose change in our pocket, nervous habits that we might not know that we're doing. That's what's so crucial about going back and watching on Tegrity some of your speeches, even if it's your name speech, to understand what you're doing. And I would encourage all of you, as you have to for your self-critique, you're going to go back and watch your informative speech and probably become aware of a lot of things that you didn't know that you were doing that might have been distractions for your audience. Also, non-verbally is a tire. We're going to go into that a little later. 68 to 93% of the message's meaning is nonverbal. And so our audience in that face-to-face situation is picking up so much nonverbal that many times that is much more of an impression than the words that we're using. All right, so let's look at how we can define terms and concepts for our audience. Now, I know that this is small, but in your Blackboard, I have a folder with all of the narrated prezzies. In other words, you can go back and see these prezzies on your own time, on your own computer screen, and just hear a narration, my voice over it. But I feel like at least with the video, this is a little more engaging. So let's talk about different ways that we can define terms or concepts. The first one is etymology. So what is etymology? It is understanding the development of the linguistic term, the linguistic development of a word. So let's say that I'm using the word information. Well, everyone knows what information means, right? But if I were to say what the Latin root of that word, the Latin root is informare, and it means to form or shape the mind or to give knowledge. So that's a better definition of information, using the Latin root, the beginnings of that word, the development of that word. The second is expertise. Possibly you're giving some type of speech on financial, let's say, financial state of affairs in the United States in some aspect or another. If you're using a financial term, it would be very easy to go then to an expert, someone on Wall Street, Alan Greenspan. How does he define that term, right? So we can go to many different financial sources to choose one that defines the term in a way that is going to help us make our point with our audience. So expertise. The third is symbol. And symbol is actually showing your audience. Showing your audience. This may be an awkward, possibly example. But let's say that you work at a carpet store here in Tuscaloosa and you're going to give an informative speech on carpet and the different types of carpet. Possibly you're going to bring in some of those little sample, right? Little kind of foot samples of different types, shag, Berber, and sisal. That would show symbolically your audience what the different terms are, in case they don't know. Now, let's say that many of you are previous Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or you're doing some kind of informational speech on sailing and you're showing them how to do a knot or talking about a specific type of knot. This would really be best for operation definitions. In other words, you're going to show the audience how to create that knot. That works for demonstration speeches. So an operational definition is by demonstration, demonstrating the word or term. So once again, if you were doing a speech on sailing, talking about a specific type of knot used in sailing, you could actually demonstrate that or show that. That would be an operational definition. Now let's move on to strategies, because if you don't take anything else away from this speech, of course I want you to use some strategies already that we've talked about, the 6, but this last one is crucial, and it's crucial for the rest of your life, especially as you get a job and advance in your profession, whatever that is. And that is to eliminate distractions. As I said, 68 to 93% of a message's meaning is nonverbal. Much research has shown that 7 to 17 seconds is all it takes to make a first impression. And in some other research, it says that 30 seconds to a minute within that time frame, someone knows whether they want to hire you or not. Is this fair? Maybe, maybe not. However, you have this knowledge, and so what you choose to do with it matters. You know, knowledge is power. So how do you choose to understand and incorporate the knowledge of first impressions and how quickly people form first impressions to your advantage? How do you create a favorable impression? How do you create a credible impression? So it's not the words that you use many times, but it's that nonverbal communication that is going to make that impression for the other individual. So how do we eliminate distractions? Let's just talk about clothing choices. Now, Miley Cyrus is obviously an extreme example, and yes, she's an idiot, even if she can sing. Moving on. The Housewives, a little better, but that's still not what we want you to be in speeches, females. Kim, I'm going to fall on the sword here. No one is listening to anything that Kim Kardashian has to say. Obviously, she really doesn't have anything worthwhile to say. But when we see her, all we see is distraction, visual distraction. Nothing that lends us to believe that she is an incredible, a credible individual on any level. Now, men, I'll pick on you for a moment. No t-shirts that have anything to say. We want you to look slick. Now, which individual would you rather hear a speech from, or that you would think would be an authority on something? Obviously, I think we would choose Jay-Z. So, what do we need to think about as we look at distractions? Visually, females, if you take nothing else away from this, let me implore, beg, and plead with you. Cute is not credible. Cute is not credible. Visual, men are visual. So if you have on clothing that is low cut, too high, a long shirt is not a dress. If it's too high, if it's too low, if it's too tight, no one is taking you seriously. They are looking at you and making impressions based on appearance, and that's it. So if all you want to be seen as is cute, then go ahead. But if you want to be taken seriously, if you want someone to listen to your message, then you have to eliminate those distractions so that people can actually hear what you're saying. So females, what I would like you to do for our speeches, as we call for you to dress in business casual or business professional attire, that you wear slacks that are not too tight, that you wear dresses that are actually below mid-thigh to the knees, that clothing is comfortable and complimentary for you and of you, not a distraction. not too much jewelry, not high heels. Anything that you would wear out to the Houndstooth, to a bar here in Tuscaloosa, is not something that you're going to wear to give a speech. Men, what I would like you to do is to wear a collared shirt. The most informal that you can be would be some type of polo collared shirt, khakis that are pressed, a belt, and some decent shoes. No types of sandals. What we'd love for you to have on is some slacks, a button-down shirt, possibly a tie, and a belt. We want you to look good so that we are taking you immediately in that first impression to be a credible individual. And then, of course, as the speech goes on, we weigh your credibility to the sources that you bring to that speech and the information, the logical structure of the speech as you reveal it to your audience. The next lesson is going to be delivery. We're going to be talking more about nonverbal communication, as well as vocal variety, how you use inflection, pauses strategically, tone, pitch of voice. Before we get into that, because you're going to be starting your speeches now, let me say for the females, the higher the pitch of voice, the less credible it is. So bring that tone down. Alto tenor is more credible than a really high, sweet baby voice. Men, everyone needs to speak with volume, resonating through the audience, reaching the person that's in the back of the room. But make sure that you're articulating and enunciating so that your audience can hear you and that you sound interesting. Don't be monotone. Be interesting non-verbally as you deliver that speech. Practice, practice, practice. There was a guy last year who did a survey on the people who had the 50 most watched, most viewed TED Talks. And he asked them how many times they prepared or ran through their speeches. And the average number of times that each speaker ran through their speech, practiced it, was 200. Please go ahead and practice that speech, record it on your phone, listen back to it, see if there are any distractions that you have that you need to eliminate before the time to give the speech, or if there's some strategies like vivid language, examples that you can employ that will make it more effective. Thank you.